This is Jay Garlitz, PA4FL in Hawthorne, Florida. In honor of Mother's Day 2026 is a special, not necessarily just a presentation, because it's an interactive discussion by members of the Medical Amateur Radio Council and HealthcareHands.org about women in amateur radio and pioneering voices across the airwaves and those that are sustaining the airwaves today. It's from 1990, pioneers now as modern innovators. We certainly know that women are getting more prominent in STEM activities, if anybody's been around education. The early pioneers, though, in 1906, Anna Evans, landline telegrapher, became one of the first women wireless operators working for Lee DeForest Station in New York City. In 1912, one of the first certified maritime radio operators, Maybelle Kelso, served aboard ships in the Northeastern Pacific. In 1916, at just 15 years old, with the call sign 6SO, Gladys Kathleen Parkin was among the youngest early operators. In 1950, Emma Chandler was one of the first North American YL operators from Ohio, operating as 8UH. So those early days, certainly not devoid of women. And I'm not sure how many of these women became mothers. Most of them did. We certainly going to celebrate them for both reasons. For the key milestones, again, 1906, we talked about Ann Evans beginning working as an operator in New York. In 1912, Maybelle Kelso, certified maritime operator. I found this was interesting, that the first New Zealand to South Africa in 1927 was made by Brenda Bell. Where those locations occurred that way. I had used AI to help generate today's presentation. We had done one last year. That on YouTube. It'd be interesting to contact too. Now the Young Ladies Radio League, I expected to see a lot more women in the from that YLRL year. And by 1940, YL Friendship was fostering. Clara Roger when turned 33, the YL Friendship. And the first YLRL convention was held in Santa Monica in 1955. In 1957, Ethel Smith helped establish the foundation. The foundation for amateur radio is still active with scholarships, succeeded for many years. That's even older than Marco. We're sitting here approximately 60 years in Marco. I'm not sure the date of incorporation is 1966. Medical Amateur Radio Council and its women members have participated in the amateur radio, speaking in front of our more active women members who serve the president. And is a mother who deserves to be honored today is Mary, AE4BX. Thank you for being here with us. And of course, in the current time, as you look through the journals, you look through QST, you look at your local clubs, you look at your colleges, you look at your code activity, you look at amateur radio on the International Space Station. Women lead in many areas of amateur radio, digital mode, satellite ops, STEM outreach, and we'll talk about some of that today as well. But some of the notable trailblazers, women who shaped the hobby, W1MPP, Eunice Randall Thompson, active at station 1XE WGI from 1919 to 1922. She was also active in commercial broadcasting, the earliest radio programs in America. We talked about Brenda Bell recently in 1927. Proved that long-distance communication is possible from the Southern Hemisphere. It wasn't just about New Zealand and South Africa. It was about DX from the Southern Hemisphere being capable. And that person, Tara Rieger, we didn't give her call sign. She coined the PW abbreviation 33, Love Sealed with Friendship. The YL call was WQ RUF. He's also a dedicated Morse code instructor, and he trained countless new operators. Is there anyone that would like to add some additional information or knowledge that they may have about these industries? Please let me know. I know there's going to be plenty of input a little later as we get into modern times, the times during our lives, 1950s to current time. In 1939, that young ladies' radio league was founded. It was an ad in QST, writing a letter to how many women, asking how many women and ham radio operators are there. So her call to action sparked 12 responses in the movement, drafted a constitution, set dues at 25 cents a year, and appointed chairwomen across U.S. call area. Sound familiar with Marco? He's centered on U.S. call area. They coined the abbreviation 33, meaning love and film, with friendship between Mile, officially adopted in 1940. It's still active, so they've been in existence for 85 plus years. And the call sign is mentioned here, a different call sign. I'm not sure if she's a different call sign. Here it lists K4LMB, and the QST magazine is W7. FWB. So realize this is an AI-generated presentation. It is quite possible that there are some errors. A potential one, not necessarily one. But by the war, in the wartime service, of course, there were many ways that women volunteered during World War II. Canadian women served as wireless operators above the Norwegian merchant navy weapons during World War II. They maintained crucial amateur radio networks while many male operators were deployed overseas. The YLRL members kept their organization running throughout the war years, preserving continuity for post-war growth. Post-war era saw rapid increase of women in radio across Europe, especially Czechoslovakia, Romania, the UK. This was mentioned last year, and I believe it was NPIM that had quite a bit to say about Hedy Lamarr. I imagine most of you know about Hedy Lamarr's accomplishments during World War II. Now, where she wasn't a ham, just goes to show you don't have to be a ham to do amateur radio, because it's the technology she developed. It led to a whole new way of using the frequencies. She was known, of course, as a worldwide glamour performer. She was a brilliant inventor. During World War II, she and composer George Atrial announcement. They developed a frequency hopping communication system designed to prevent the jamming of radio guided torpedoes. I mean, it's a significant contribution to the war effort, and also the foundation for modern spectrum communications. Main principles behind today's Wi-Fi, Bluetooth, GPS, amateur radio, digital signal. Patent is outlined here in August of 1942 for a secret communication system. I wonder if they made that patent public, though, being that it was during the war. You'd think it probably would have been subdued, so it wasn't found by the Japanese and Germans. That had obviously a lasting impact on amateur radio. So Lamarr was inducted to the National Inventors Hall of Fame in 2014, a recognition long overdue for one of history's most unconventional inventors. The changes in amateur radio, women in amateur radio, because in 1931, the statistics at that time were 86 versus 18,000 men. But now, 15% of the licensees are women, and it's growing. And we see that in colleges, the high schools. You see that at Hamvention and Hamcation when you walk around. The president of the club at Embry Riddle in Daytona Beach, their campus is a woman. And that's not uncommon these days. 85 years of YLRL continuous operation exists. and there's 100+ countries with active women operators. So even though women were a small fraction of early operators, their influence on organization, education, and international outreach was disproportionately large. They were doing important things in the field. What about the modern area? Where are women involved? Certainly on the air during life. In leadership as well as activity, we've got DXpeditions to remote locations. I personally, at P33A in Buttaba Island, had Ann, WA1 Estes, who's been in many DXpeditions, and she spoke during this discussion last year. But they're also active in radio contests, they're earning recognition on the global stage. I don't know how many of our Marco women are active in radio contests. I know Diane Rodman is continuously on radio contests, sometimes on her own. She likes to do radio, among other modes. But STEM education, ham radio serves as a gateway to science, technology, engineering, and math careers, and operators mentor new generations through towards its school programs. Emergency communication, women play vital roles in areas, amateur radio emergency services, providing communications during natural disasters and community emergencies. And let's not forget digital and satellite, not even talking about the International Space Station and their education endeavors in the space station. The women astronauts as well. The women were also at the forefront of digital mode, software, defined radio, and satellite communications. It's not just men there at AMSAT doing the technology, it's women as well, pushing the hobby's technical barrier. So maybe we'll get to the point where we don't worry, but we aren't even concerned about whether somebody is a male or female in terms of amateur. And I'm in dental school, medical school, and probably in nursing school. Those of you that were educated in the 1970s, 80s, and even 90s, remember the time women had a low percentage of spots in the classes. Mary, when did you go to medical school? How many classmates did you have that were women? I turn the mic over to AE for BX if you can activate your mic there. There. Yeah, we're not hearing you, Mary. You're still muted. Maybe I'll come back to you when I see your mic is not muted. I know it can be confusing.
I have the audio off. Now are you?
Great. You do. Tell us about your adventures in medical school.
Say that again now.
Let's hear about your adventures in medical school as being a woman. What type of contingent of women were there in your medical school class?
Well, at University of Wisconsin, it was a limited of 10%. And the women had to get 3.9. The guys could be as low as 3.6. And they didn't want us there at all. It was a very negative feeling. So you had to be better than others and shut your mouth and do what you're supposed to do. And, later on it got better, but it was a very negative impact for us.
Was the quota instituted by the university system? Or was
by the older doctors who felt that it shouldn't be contaminated by a lot of women, and then of course the women wanted time off and that sort of thing, not to work every other night and all that sort of thing. So, but you're better off just shutting your mouth and doing the work, and you get by.
Well, tell us. I mean, you have a family. I mean, you have children. You balanced your career and motherhood.
I was married just as I graduated from medical school and had a son at the end of my first year. So he went through internship with me, and he was born the last week of my internship. And then I took 2 months off and had another baby, You just did what you had to do. So, now he said, he didn't think women should have time off for all of this pregnancy and all this stuff. So he's kind of a male chauvinist pig now. And my son, who's a physician, but he's an oncologist and does well. We were just with him for early morning brunch already. He's on call this weekend, so we had the early morning brunch, and everybody turned out all right.
Happy Mother's Day, Mary.
Mother's Day is good. My husband's here from Myrtle Beach. I'll go down there tomorrow and spend a week, and and then my son lives in Charlotte, right next door, so we see them and their family. His wife's a physician also. She's a cardiologist. So they say, well, don't worry about cancer or heart disease. We got those covered. You're not going to have those, you have something else. So,
I guess you made a wise move, being closer to family on both counts, family and medical care.
yeah, that's right. And
Yeah.
it works out pretty well. I don't need much ordinarily, but
Let's keep it that way.
yeah,
Thank you for your comments, Mary. So, Mary, my dental class was, I don't know, maybe less than 15%. We entered in 1978. No quota, though. I mean, you got to realize, I mean, in the modern world, as far as I know, at least 50% of patients are women. I don't,
yeah.
I don't see why you wouldn't want health providers that are women. We didn't have quotas of that type. That's why I asked you if it was university instituted. Because in our school, the quotas was the first dental school in the state. And they did have quotas, but the quotas were geographic quotas. We only had 66 dentists being trained a year in Florida. So you'd pick, like a fifth of them from South Florida, a fifth of them from the Panhandle, because you want people to go back and serve their communities. It's only wise to have a class of demographics that represents the populations.
But basically, in the old days, you felt better with the man doctor. You thought he was a little better. And it wasn't until later that women came along as equal or better. So,
That's perception was false and obviously has passed at
yeah,
this time. I certainly don't look at the sex of a doctor when I pick one. I would say probably two-thirds of my physicians just happen to be, women,
yeah.
just because they happen to be the ones in that field that are at our health institution. Thank you for your word. Appreciate that. Is there anyone else that would like to talk about the amount of women that were in their class? Andy, would you tell us a little bit about, uh, was it Ohio State that you were in medical school, or I know you went undergrad to WJD? Andy, where were you at medical school?
Yeah, I went to medical school in Cincinnati, and yeah, 4 years there. And I think we had roughly, I mean, I had a class, I think 194, and there were roughly 25 women in the class. Uh, um,
That's the same percentage or even higher than we had in our dental school class.
yeah.
Yeah, life was a lot different. Was Chicago any different, Stuart? Did you when you went to medical school, WA9ZPL?
I attended the University of Illinois Chicago. We had women. I don't know the percentage. I'm guessing maybe 15%, and I don't know what their grade point average. Complicated system.
Getting some dropout now, students.
It was a complicated system where they had one set of admission requirements for people from Cook County, where Chicago is, and another set of admission requirements for people outside of Cook County. I do have one question. Maybe Mary could respond. There are very, very few medical school deans who are women. And if you look at the pipeline, it seems like there are very, very few women in the pipeline to become future medical school deans. So that seems to be the current frontier with no remedy in sight. Comment?
Well, I find very few women chairman of the departments, for anything along the line. And some women have complained about that they were not considered to be chairman of this or that. And, but on the other hand, if you're raising children, as I was, as one too, I don't want extra meetings. I didn't want any extra responsibility. It was enough to go and do my job. I had a full-time maid at home and come home and be with the children. And so you have that negative feeling about women taking on, all this stuff too. So I don't think it's all being held down. It's some preference also.
Stuart, did you have anybody else you wanted to ask any questions?
Nothing further right now.
Okay. Mary, we have the dean of the College of Dentistry is a woman, Isabella Garcia, and she does have children. She's a mother. I don't, of course, being dean, she probably was after her children were adults. But we do have chairwomen from our departments or divisions. My division and also department chair are women in restorative dentistry and prosthetic dentistry. And actually, I would say our faculty is at least 50 within prosthetics, at least 50% women. It's changed quite a bit here in Florida. The students I work with are well over 50%. I would say
well, in medicine, you have these specialties that require a lot of physical, rigor, surgery and orthopedics and all that sort of thing that women do not necessarily cater to. You're more happy in pediatrics and family practice, and that's what I did. So.
Yeah, which is the irony here at UF Dental School, because the pediatric department is a male chair, and the more intense things are women, but I think we'll see a lot of that blurring. I had many female dental associates, including some that were quite small in stature, and no problem on doing surgery. And of course, we don't have the stamina involved where you're in an operating room for 5 or 6 hours at a time.
Yeah.
And we're still talking a lot of, strength. Just, no issues with fulcrums and et cetera, biomechanical aspects. But thank you for your input. Let's go on and look a little bit more here about women leaders in amateur radio clubs. We already talked about the YLRL founder, Ethel Smith, and here it explains the licenses. She was licensed as W7FWB in 1936, and it looks like she moved to Virginia, so that was not a mistake of AI. She could have founded the Foundation for Amateur Radio in 1957, but at the same time served as ARL Virginia Southeastern SEC coordinator and earned the Dayton Hamvention Special Achievement. So 60 years in the hobby celebrated by passing her extra class exam. We talked last year extensively about Kay Craigie, N3KM, the first woman ARL president, and the 15th president from 2010. She had 3 terms through the centennial of the league in 2014. She was first licensed in 1983 and became a section manager in the Atlantic Division before reaching the presidency. She represented the ARL at international conferences, championed the Amateur Radio Parity Act, and signed the league's first formal agreement with the Boy Scouts of America. So she was a leader, but she was also a leader as the face of American amateur radio. Very prominent position. And a youth education pioneer, Carol Perry, WB2MGP, for 30 years taught introduction to amateur radio at Staten Island Middle School, guiding 950 students per year through the hobby. Named in 1987 as the Dayton Ham of the Year and ARL Instructor of the Year. She created the Radio Club of America's Young Achievers Award and moderated the Dayton Invention Youth Forum for over 3 decades. Extremely extreme advocate for young operators and a great role model. There's also some mentions of other individuals and other organizations and female leaders at the bottom of this particular image. This is someone that was important to me. Growing up in South Florida, and I was 13 years old as a ham, got a ride over to Tropical Ham Baroo, the big ham radio meeting in Miami. It used to be ham radio. Very prominent meeting, very well attended. Was the second largest ham fest at the time. She chaired it for 45 years. She also served as Southeast Division Vice Director for more than 20 years, honorary Vice President in 2002. She was the first woman to serve on the ARL board, inducted into the CQ Amateur Radio Hall of Fame in 2012. She provided vital hurricane relief communication, and she inspired an entire family of operators. So she was a ham radio family. Her husband Carl, W4 DTJ, fellow operator, his son Alan, and also carried on with her granddaughter Stephanie, having her grandfather's original call with W4 DTJ. We have members within our Marco membership that are women. I'm thinking of Alana K4AHD, and both her children also have the children operators and one at the moment. So the tradition moves on. But Evelyn was a very special person, very influential in my young amateur radio career. Is there anyone here who had a similar mentor or a role model in their local area growing up, if you were licensed at that age? No. And I don't see N4TSC with us, Jerry. And of course, Jerry, I don't think lived in South Florida necessarily during that time, but it'd be interesting to hear if Evelyn was as much of an influence on some of the other South Florida hams. Bill mentioned, not to forget, the Colvin, which is W6QL, Iris Colvin of the DX organization, the Yasmi Foundation. Thank you for the input, Bill. And the lasting legacy, community building from the YLRL, 12 founding members to thousands of women operators worldwide, creating lasting networks of mentorship, friendship, and shared knowledge. And that's important. I mean, if you go to Hamvention or Hamcation, you'll see women present. A lot of people bring their spouses. But if you go to your local amateur radio club for a regular meeting, the numbers may not be as favorable, although that is changing. But we need to make sure that everyone feels welcome. As Mary said, you can be admitted into an organization or a training program. It doesn't mean that you're welcomed into that program. You know, we want the hobby to grow, and we want it to be congenial, and we want to see more women in the hobby. I mean, you always want to look for different groups to attract that have not found the hobby particularly attractive before. So let's not forget that this is a potential resource for amateur radio growth. In breaking barriers, every pioneer who picked up a microphone or tapped a key challenged the assumptions about who belonged in technical fields, inspiring generations to follow. And women in amateur radio built bridges across borders and cultures, demonstrating that communication knows no boundaries or gender or geography. So what about amateur radio operators in public service when the bands go silent, when there's hurricanes that knock out cell towers? We had previously talked about Evelyn Gauzens doing that. But when Pearl Harbor silenced civilian transmitters, YLRL members answered the call under their motto, QRV, I am ready, because WIRES, Women's in Radio and Electrical Service, training military personnel in code and radio theory, so they were able to serve and the Signal Corps is operators, technicians, and repair women. .NAP, W2MIY, was the only woman radio aide in the Army amateur radio system. First Lady Eleanor Roosevelt praised their work, the organization's work. The YL work is an inspiration to the nation. We have Rosalie White right here in ARL, K1STO, who was licensed till 1970 and spent 20 years at ARL headquarters managing the Field and Educational Services Department, overseeing emergency communications, ARES, education programs, the vast voluntary infrastructure that keeps amateur radio's public service mission alive. With a staff of 12, she shaped the policies and training that prepared thousands for operators for disaster response. A former Indiana science teacher and private pilot, she brought methodical professionalism to the League's MCOM programs. Are any of us that are here currently in their locale working with MCOM individuals that happen to be women? Anyone that'd like to offer some comments? Yeah, well, granted, we're a small group today because it is Mother's Day. It's a holiday weekend. Certainly, a lot of us are out celebrating. And as those of our members listen to the recording and watch the video, I'm sure they'll have more input for future years. Feel free to contact me at my QRZ email address and offer some input so that when it comes to next year's presentation, we continue to build on that. Hurricane responses in 2017, when Hurricanes Harvey and Maria devastated Texas and Puerto Rico, women operators deployed alongside the Red Cross to provide critical communication where cell towers and power grids had failed. The ARL shipped 25 radio kits to Puerto Rico as the territory went dark, and volunteer operators, including women from ARES and local clubs, staffed emergency nets around the clock. And today, women serve as ARES emergency coordinators, skywarn spotters for tornadoes, thunderstorm activity, net control stations across the country. Including an amateur radio's public service mission belongs to everyone, not just men. Someplace where women have found a strong presence is in Minnesota. Women in summits on the air, hiking to peaks, radio, and the pack. It's become very popular for a number of reasons. The camaraderie among people that enjoy mountain climbing and those that are amateur radio operators. And women groups like to get together, so it's not always just with men. Sometimes it's camaraderie amongst themselves. Operators carry portable gear to mountain peaks and make contacts from the summit. 19 female mountain goats of 1,000 activators who have 1,000 activator points in North America alone. So we're not just talking entry-level people. We're talking about very active individuals. In 2024, launched Queens of the Mountain events. Now an international tradition drawing participants from over 50 countries. And some are listed here. One, unfortunately, is a silent key, Triple Mountain Goat. Liz Burns, who, interesting enough, was totally blind, but she refused to let that stop her. K1LIZ, she earned Triple Mountain Goat 3,000 points in just 4 years, hiking summits with her husband, Ron, and R3E. The Queens of the Mountains K1LIZ Memorial Award now honors her legacy of determination. Amy WAG7GP and Paula K9RA formed Queen of the Mountains in 2024, inspired by a group of 8 YLs who activated the summit together in 2023. They launched that Queen of the Mountains organization. It's in its 3rd year, and it draws activators from over 50 countries for a weekend of sisterhood on the summit. And a 6-time mountain goat and Karine HB9SFZC is a Swiss operator. She's done 6 mountain goat diplomas, 6,000 points in June 2025, with 3 demanding alpine tours through the cantons of Bern and Freiburg. one of the most accomplished soda activators in Europe, male or female. There's also a list of some of the other fairly active from other countries, South Africa, also from here in the Midwest and out west in the Rockies, Pikes Peak, uh, also Romania, so in Europe. Is there anyone else that would like to comment on individuals they know that do soda? Well, here in Florida, we don't really have much in the way of mountains, so I'm afraid I can't talk about that in the context of Florida. But I mentioned Ann, WA1S, Women on DXpeditions, and you had mentioned before Bill Iris Colvin from the ASME, and her and her husband, they traveled extensively to 221 countries, operating from 169 of them over 30 years and 1 million contacts logged. The foundation continues funding DXpeditions and amateur radio education worldwide. Now, Anne had been to many of them. I don't remember if she'd been to Scarborough Reef, but I know she was at one of those ones that was on a platform. And believe me, it's pretty rough, some of these expeditions. I was there with Anne in the same sleeping quarters, and a lot of times if we had a cot, we were lucky. Equatorial heat, no air conditioning, no running water, electricity only by the generators we bought. Fortunately, we had an ice machine, but Anne was a leader. She was out there building the antennas, doing the operating, and she wouldn't let anything stop her. She's a bundle of energy. And I'm very fortunate that she's relocated to Florida. So I get to see Anne very often. So that's a tiny island in the middle of nowhere. And that was a month-long trip. And she's been to trips just as long or longer. We also have listed Elvira, and I see Elvira in our ham radio media, IV3FSG, an Italian operator who completed a solo 2-week expedition this month here, last month, to Rome Island in Guinea. The first to put the 3X prefix on 60 meters, giving hundreds of operators a new run from one of West Africa's rarest locations. Helen Archibald, VA1YL, an island explorer, a Canadian operator, operated more than 2 the expeditions to rare maritime islands with her family. Others, Valerie Holtzfeld, NV9L, the first woman CQDX marathon winner, has been the lead pilot for 4 major DXpeditions. Dina VK6DEE from the Cocos Keeling Island DXpedition here in 2026. Marion Briggs, N1QV from the Andaman Islands in south of India in 2026. And here's Anne mentioned WA1S. And when she went on this trip, she was with 2 of us from Marco, Arnie N6HD, who was the lead physician on the DXpedition, and myself. Contesting, I mentioned that Diane NM2K, one of our own Marco members, is an active contester. And there's others as well. Ellen White, W1YL, and she was co-founded the Yankee Clipper Contest Club, the founding grandmother of the Florida Contest Group. So she's been active for many years. She was licensed in 1946. Valerie Holtzfield, who we just mentioned, who was also Invention Amateur of the Year in 2018, licensed in 2006, and operating major DXpeditions. Co-host the Ham Nation Netcast, deployed in the Red Cross to Puerto Rico after Hurricane Maria, providing critical amateur radio communications. And the YL Contesting Traditions, YLRL sponsored its own contests. Any input from our members here? Anyone that would like to make some comments? Please let me know.
I have a few comments, Jay.
Please, I'll turn the mic over to Barry, WB1FFI.
Yeah, I think it's a great presentation today. And I just had a few things. I was just looking up some stuff on the internet just to try to factualize some of this stuff. But I was blessed to attend Tufts Medical School in Boston. I graduated in 1980, and they had a very rounded approach in both their acceptance, looking at students not just for their board scores and their grades and the thing. They really looked at a well-rounded individual, which I think current medical schools are slowly coming around to that there's more to a physician than just their grades and board scores. People's experiences, their resilience, so forth. There's just a lot of factors. Anyway, getting back to the women part, I had my 45th medical school reunion last May, and it gave me an opportunity to chat with some of the women in my class. And it turns out Tufts was a leader in women in medical school, even going back to the 1890s, which I found on the internet. My class had about 25% women, which was considered high. The numbers said the average medical school class was up to 16%, so we were 10% above that. But the women would, and I knew a little bit about this back then, but not any. They felt more comfortable talking about it 45 years after that. It started in the first and second year of medical school when we were at our lectures, and inappropriate cartoons and jokes and lecturer comments were pervasive back then. And of course, being male, we just kind of didn't even pay much attention to it. But it did rile a number of the women who some actually complained, and unfortunately may have paid somewhat because of grades or recommendations and so forth. And then it continued into the third and fourth years, where we transitioned into our clinical years. In general surgery, particularly, women did not have their own locker rooms. They had to use nurses' locker rooms. And as most people remember from their training, a lot of the case discussions that go on before surgery happen in the locker room. And the women didn't have that advantage. So that was one major factor. Never mind the fact that they weren't treated equally. It took a while before women's locker rooms, and in fact, I think I was working at a surgery center, outpatient, and I think they still had the women using the nursing and other staff locker room. So it's not universal. Other factors, physical harassment. I was told that inappropriate touching occurred on several occasions with a number of the women. Verbal abuse. I'm just looking here. And anyway, I'll skip through that. Just to mention, Tufts was a leader in having the first associate dean, Vivian Pinn, who was, when she graduated from Virginia's medical school, University of Virginia, she was the first Black and only woman in her graduating medical school class, was associate dean at Tufts from the 1970s while I was there till about 1982. She was a pathologist. And the current dean of Tufts Medical School is Helen Boucher, Boucher, and apparently she's the first and maybe the only dean of a medical school in the United States. Fill me in if I'm incorrect about that. And she was became the dean in 2022. So I just wanted to kind of fill in my perspective. I had a chance to talk to Mary in El Paso over a number of meals. We had breakfast together, if I recall. And Mary filled me in on a number of situations that her experiences, as she's alluded to earlier in this net. But you know, it's tough getting through medical school in general. To add on all this harassment and so forth, it's just sad. But it's a testimony to the excellence and the persistence, and that women and minorities have excelled in medicine, and it gives. I'm humbled by it. I think it's just a wonderful, wonderful thing to round out our profession. So thank you, Jay. Back to you.
Yeah, thank you, Barry. Any other comments?
Well, you talk about men getting together, and we had to use the nurses' locker room, that's for sure. But we got a women's bathroom with a cot and some easy chairs, and that's where we met in the women's john all the time. And for lunch hours, and we look that up on reunion days because we had such a good time in the women's john. And so times were different then. It wasn't equality for all. You did what you needed to do and shut your mouth a lot, and you get along better. And that's kind of universal for treatment anyway. But we had a good time, and we didn't miss the camaraderie because we had our own. But out of our 10 that were in the class, we only graduated 5. The others dropped out.
Oh, that's terrible. Manir?
Yeah, I have 2 comments, Jay. You mentioned SOTA. Women are very active in POTA also. As a matter of fact, my Morse code instructor from CW Oxford fundamental class last year, she is still extremely active in POTA, and she's a wonderful instructor. I heard from some other instructors that women tend to do better at Morse code than men. I haven't studied it, but something worth looking at. Something interesting. I would like to compare cultures a little bit. I went to medical school in the 70s at the American University of Beirut. We didn't have harassment, we didn't have a quota, but then there you cannot really you're not allowed to harass women anyway. I mean, it's frowned upon very, very strongly. It's kind of not the thing to be done. We didn't have a lot of women in the class. We had quite a few, and they were brilliant. They were good. They all graduated. One of them works here in Pittsburgh, actually, and they all went to successful careers with children. But there was no quota, so many men, so many women. There was a geographic quota, Jay, for the same reason. They wanted to make sure that not everybody is from the main city. They wanted to make sure that they go and serve their community. So I had a different experience, or maybe I was not as attuned to it, but I really, there was a camaraderie between men and women, men and men, women and women. I didn't see that problem significantly. Anyway, that's my observation.
Thank you.
Sure.
Any other input? Chip and 5RTF?
You're muted, Chip.
Well, you're still muted, Chip. You're unmute. There you go.
That better? This is in 5RTF. Out of a class of 150 in 1974 in Mississippi, we had 20 women. One dropped out, but the rest were excellent physicians eventually. And psychiatry has always had a larger share of women than most specialties. Part of it is the lifestyle, part of it is the subject matter, but there's really no difference in performance between the men and women in psychiatry. You're lucky to get a female psychiatrist if you can find one. They're very, very good, very, very professional, very empathetic. And I've had a lot of good friends in the profession.
Thank you for that, Chip. Women in AMSAT, we go to the satellites. We had talked about space station before, but the developers are on the technical side. Some of them are women too. in the leadership and the administration also as well, being on the board of director, office managers, and right now the current status is probably different. I don't think Martha is AMSAT anymore, but I don't know that for sure. Martha Saragovitz was there for years, and anyone that had anything to AMSAT would certainly have Martha as a contact person. But we appreciate today being a special day for you and the women in your lives, the mothers in your lives. We appreciate everyone being here. Some have had to already depart so they can be with their families. And certainly a very enjoyable topic to not only celebrate, but to honor our own here. So I'm going to go ahead here and wish everybody a happy Mother's Day, and do so with your families.